There are rules in this universe that nobody talks about. Not the kind written in books, not the kind posted on walls, the kind that exist in silence, the kind enforced by powerful beings who never show their faces, the kind that, if you break them, you disappear. And one man broke every single one of them. His name was Caden Rowe, a human, a mechanic, a nobody from a backwater repair station on the edge of the known galaxy. He had grease under his fingernails, a broken scanner on his workbench, and absolutely zero business touching the technology he was about to build. But he built it anyway. And what happened next shook 3 star systems, angered the most powerful diplomatic council in the galaxy, and gave one small alien girl the chance to fly for the very first time in her life. Here is the first thing that will shock you. The technology Caden used was not just restricted. It was classified at the highest level possible. Alien governments had spent decades making sure no human ever got close to it. They called it Tier 0 engineering. And the penalty for unauthorized access was not a fine. It was not prison. Sources suggest the penalty was permanent exile to a dead moon, with no atmosphere and no way back. Here is the second thing. The galactic diplomat who showed up at Caden's door was not there to arrest him. At least, not at first. What that diplomat said when he saw the finished machine is something nobody in the official record ever expected. And here's the third thing. The little alien girl this machine was built for, the one they said would never race, never fly, never feel the wind on her face again, she had a secret of her own. A secret that changed everything about why Caden really built that pod racer. Let me show you exactly how this happened. The repair station had no name. Most places in the Outer Rim did not bother with names. Names meant maps. Maps meant visitors. And visitors meant trouble. So the station just floated there. A rusted collection of metal platforms and pressurized tunnels, orbiting a dim orange star that nobody had claimed and nobody wanted. Caden Rowe had lived there for 6 years. He was 34 years old. Medium height. Lean but strong from years of hauling engine parts and crawling through tight mechanical spaces. He had dark brown hair that was always a little too long, a beard he trimmed maybe once a month, and eyes the color of deep ocean water back on Earth. Eyes that noticed everything. He had not always been a mechanic on a forgotten station. Once, he had been something more. He had trained at the Meridian Technical Institute on Earth, one of the top engineering schools in the human territories. He had graduated near the top of his class. He had been recruited by 3 different companies before he even finished his final exams. But that was before the accident, before the collapse of the Vega Station project, before the investigation, before his name ended up in a report that nobody was supposed to read, but everybody did. He had not done anything wrong. The official findings even said so. But in the world of galactic engineering contracts, being connected to a disaster even innocently was enough to end a career. So Caden ended up here, on a station with no name, fixing broken cargo haulers and second-hand navigation systems for traders who paid in whatever they had and asked no questions. He was good at his job. Better than good. He could diagnose an engine problem by sound alone. He could rebuild a thruster assembly in the dark. He had once repaired a life support system using nothing but spare parts from 3 different alien ship models and a length of copper wire he found in a storage crate. But nobody out here cared about that. Out here, you were just a pair of hands. You fixed things. You got paid. You survived. That was the life Caden had accepted, until the morning the small transport ship docked at Bay 7. He heard it before he saw it. The engine had a distinctive rattle, a harmonic vibration in the secondary intake that told him the fuel compression was off by about 12%. He made a mental note without even thinking about it. Old habit. The ship was small and battered. Pale gray hull with faded markings from what looked like 3 different registration systems. Someone had been moving around a lot. Someone who did not want to be tracked. The docking ramp lowered slowly. And then, she appeared. She was small. Even by the standards of her species, which Caden recognized immediately as Velhari, she was small. The Velhari were a gentle people. Soft features. Large amber eyes. small rounded ears that sat high on their heads and moved slightly when they were listening carefully. Their skin had a faint luminescent quality, like moonlight caught just under the surface. This girl could not have been more than 9 or 10 years old in Valhari years, which put her at roughly equivalent to a human child of about 7. She was sitting in a mobility frame, a mechanical support structure that wrapped around her lower body and moved her legs for her. It was old technology, outdated. The joints were stiff and the power cell was clearly struggling. Every step the frame took made a grinding sound that made Caden wince. Behind her came an older Valhari woman, tall, tired-looking, with the same amber eyes but carrying years of worry in them. She held a worn travel bag in one hand and kept her other hand close to the girl, not touching, just close. Ready. The girl looked around the repair bay with wide, curious eyes. She was not afraid. That was the first thing Caden noticed. Most children, human or alien, who arrived at a place like this looked nervous. The station was loud and industrial and smelled like fuel and metal, but this girl looked at everything like she was studying it, like she was filing it away. Her eyes landed on Caden. She smiled. It was the kind of smile that did not ask for anything. It just existed. Pure and simple and completely unguarded. Caden felt something shift in his chest. He could not explain it. He just felt it. The older woman approached him. Her name, she said in careful standard galactic, was Sarah. The girl was her granddaughter. Her name was Lyra. Sarah explained that the mobility frame needed servicing. The power cell was failing, and 2 of the joint actuators had worn down to almost nothing. She had been told that this station could handle repairs of this kind. Caden said yes. He could handle it. He brought Lyra and Sarah into the main workshop. He gave Lyra a stool near his workbench where she could watch. Most adults would have put a child somewhere out of the way. But something told him this girl would want to see. He was right. While he worked on the frame, Lyra watched every single thing he did. She asked questions. Careful, precise questions. Not the random questions of a bored child. Real questions. Why did he use that tool instead of the other one? What did that component do? How did the actuator know when to stop? Caden answered every one. By the time he finished the repair, 2 hours had passed and he had barely noticed. He could not remember the last time 2 hours had gone by that fast in this workshop. He handed the frame back. Sarah paid him. She paid him more than he asked, which almost never happened out here. They were preparing to leave when Lyra stopped. She had been looking at something in the corner of the workshop. A collection of parts Caden had been slowly gathering for months. Pieces of different machines, curved hull panels, compact thruster components, a guidance array he had salvaged from a wrecked racing vessel 3 months ago. Lyra looked at those parts for a long moment. Then she looked at Caden. She said, very quietly, that it looked like the beginning of a pod racer. Caden stopped moving. He looked at the parts. Then he looked at her. He asked her how she knew what a pod racer looked like. She said she had seen one race once, on a vid feed. She had watched it 17 times. She said that when the racer went fast, really fast, it looked like flying. And she had always wanted to fly. She said it simply. No sadness in her voice, just honesty. But Caden saw Sarah look away quickly. And he understood. Lyra could not walk without the frame. She could not run. She could not do most of the physical things children her age did. But in a pod racer, none of that mattered. In a pod racer, your hands controlled everything. Your mind controlled everything. Your body just had to sit there and be brave. Caden looked at the parts in the corner for a long time after they left. He thought about the guidance array. He thought about the thruster components. He thought about the curved hull panels that were almost exactly the right size for a single-seat cockpit built for someone small. He thought about Tier 0 engineering restrictions. He thought about the classified status of pod racer propulsion technology. He thought about the fact that humans were explicitly, formally, and permanently banned from working with that technology under the Galactic Engineering Accord of 2287. He thought about all of that. And then he walked over to the corner and picked up the guidance array. He turned it over in his hands, studied it, felt the weight of it. He set it back down. He went to bed. He stared at the ceiling for 4 hours. And then he got up, walked back to the workshop, turned on every light, and started to build. The first problem was the propulsion core. A pod racer was not like other machines. It was not like a cargo hauler or a patrol skimmer, or even a standard racing vessel. A pod racer operated on a completely different principle. It used something called resonance thrust. 2 massive engines linked by a control cable, generating a field of synchronized energy that pulled the cockpit pod forward at speeds that should not have been physically possible for something that size. The technology behind resonance thrust was Tier 0. That meant it had been developed by alien engineers, specifically by the Dravathi, an ancient species whose understanding of energy physics was so far ahead of human science that most human engineers could not even read their technical documents without a specialized translation matrix. The Galactic Engineering Accord had been very clear. Humans were not permitted to work with, replicate, modify, or study resonance thrust technology. The official reason given was safety. Resonance thrust in untrained hands could create feedback loops powerful enough to destroy a small building. The unofficial reason, the one that people whispered about in engineering circles, was something else entirely. The Dravathi did not want humans catching up. They had spent centuries at the top of the galactic engineering hierarchy. They were not interested in sharing that position. Caden knew all of this. He also knew that the wrecked racing vessel he had salvaged 3 months ago had contained a partial resonance core. Damaged. Incomplete. But there. He had not touched it since he found it. He had told himself he was saving it for parts. He had told himself a lot of things. Now he pulled it out of storage and set it on his main workbench under the brightest light in the workshop. The core was about the size of a large toolbox. Cylindrical, made of a dark metallic alloy that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Along its surface were a series of geometric engravings that were not decorative. They were functional. They were part of the energy channeling system. Caden had a translation matrix, an old one, purchased legally for general engineering reference. It was not supposed to be used for Tier 0 documents. But it could read the engravings. He spent the first 3 days just reading. He did not touch the core. He did not attempt any modifications. He just read. He read the engravings over and over. He cross-referenced them with everything he knew about standard energy physics. He built mental models. He drew diagrams on actual paper because he did not want any of this on a digital system that could be accessed remotely. By the end of the 3rd day, he understood about 60% of what he was looking at. That was more than most human engineers would ever understand. That was more than the Accord said he was allowed to understand. He kept going. The hull came together first because that was the part he knew best. He had the curved panels. He had the structural framing materials. He had spent years working on vessel hulls of every shape and size. He could do this part in his sleep. But he did not build it like he was half asleep. He built it like it was the most important thing he had ever made. Because it was. He thought about Lyra every time he made a decision. Every curve of the cockpit. Every angle of the seat support. Every placement of the control interface. He thought about her small hands. He thought about the mobility frame and how it moved. He thought about what she would need to reach, what she would need to see, what would make her feel like she was flying rather than just sitting inside a machine. He built the cockpit around her without her being there. He built it from memory. From the 2 hours she had sat on that stool and asked him questions. From the way she had looked at those parts in the corner. From the way she had said the word flying like it was the most important word in any language. The engine mounts were the next challenge. Standard pod racer engines were enormous. They were built for open desert racing on planets with wide flat terrain. They were not built for a small station workshop or for a child pilot. Caden had to scale everything down, not just in size but in power output. A full-scale resonance thrust system would tear a small cockpit apart. He needed something that produced the same principle of thrust, but at a fraction of the intensity. This was where his engineering training came back to him in ways he had not expected. He had studied harmonic resonance systems at Meridian, not for pod racers, for industrial applications. Vibration dampening in large structures, energy distribution in mining equipment. The mathematics were similar. The physics were related. He started building his own version of the resonance core, not a copy of the Dravathi design. Something new. Something that used the same principles but arrived at them through a different path. A human path. He worked 18 hours a day. He slept on a cot in the corner of the workshop. He ate whatever was easy. He stopped taking outside repair jobs. His savings were not large, but they were enough to keep the station running for a few months if he was careful. He was not careful about anything except the machine. 3 weeks in, he had a working prototype of his modified resonance core. It was smaller than the original. Lighter. The output was about 30% of a standard racing engine, but the field it generated was stable. Perfectly stable. More stable actually than the damaged original core had been designed to produce. He ran tests. Quiet tests. Tests that would not register on any external monitoring system. He was careful about that. He was careful about everything that could be detected. The core hummed when it ran. A low, smooth sound. Almost musical. Caden sat in the workshop at 2 a.m. listening to that hum, and felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt like an engineer. Not a repair technician. Not a pair of hands on a forgotten station. An actual engineer. Someone building something that had never existed before. Something that mattered. He went back to work. Word travels fast in the outer rim. Not through official channels. Not through news feeds or diplomatic communications. Through the informal network of traders and drifters and station operators who move through the quiet edges of the galaxy and talk to each other the way people have always talked. Quietly. Carefully. With one eye on the door. Someone had seen the parts Caden was gathering. Someone had noticed the workshop lights burning through the night cycle. Someone had mentioned it to someone else. By the 5th week of construction, Caden had a visitor. His name was Dross. He was a Cathani, a species known for their sharp business instincts and their complete lack of anything resembling sentiment. Cathani were tall and thin, with pale gray skin and eyes that were entirely silver. No pupil. No iris. Just a flat metallic surface that reflected everything and revealed nothing. Dross ran a trading operation out of a mid-size freighter. He dealt in information as much as goods. He knew things. He sold things. He was not dangerous in the way that someone with a weapon was dangerous. He was dangerous in the way that someone with knowledge and no loyalty was dangerous. He walked into Caden's workshop without knocking. He looked at the machine on the workbench. He looked at it for a long time without saying anything. Then he said that it looked like a pod racer. Caden said it was a personal project. Dross said that personal projects involving Tier 0 technology were not really personal. He said that the Galactic Engineering Accord had monitoring provisions. He said that certain parties paid very well for information about unauthorized engineering activity in the Outer Rim. Caden put down his tools. He looked at Dross. He asked what Dross wanted. Dross said he wanted a percentage. A finder's fee, he called it. For his silence, for his continued lack of interest in what was happening in this workshop. Caden thought about this for a moment. Then he said no. Dross blinked. His silver eyes caught the workshop light. He said that was not a wise answer. Caden said he understood that. He said he also understood that Dross had come alone, which meant he had not yet told anyone else what he had seen. Because if he had already told someone, he would not need to come here for a payment. He would already have his payment. Dross was quiet for a moment. Caden said that meant Dross was here because he wanted to make a private deal before going public. Which meant Dross was not certain enough about what he had seen to risk reporting it without confirmation, because a false report to the wrong authority in the Outer Rim could end a trading operation very quickly. Dross looked at him with those flat silver eyes. Caden said that if Dross left now and said nothing, that situation would continue. If Dross said anything to anyone, Caden would make sure the right people knew exactly which trading routes Dross used, and which cargo manifests did not quite match what was actually in his holds. It was a bluff. Mostly. Caden did not actually have that information. But he said it like he did. Dross left. Caden stood in the workshop for a long time after that. His hands were not entirely steady. He was not a confrontational person. He did not enjoy that kind of exchange. But he had meant every word of it. He went back to work. But the visit from Dross told him something important. He was running out of time. Whatever he was going to build, he needed to build it faster. The outer rim had eyes everywhere. Eventually someone would talk to someone who would talk to someone else, and the wrong people would hear about it. He pushed harder. He worked through 2 full sleep cycles without stopping. He made mistakes when he was that tired. And he knew it. So he built in a checking system. Every component he installed, he tested 3 times before moving on. Every connection he made, he verified twice. The engine mounts went on in week 6. The control interface came together in week 7. This was the part Caden was most proud of. He had designed it specifically for Lyra. The standard podracer control system required significant physical strength and a wide range of arm movement. Lyra's mobility limitations meant her upper body strength and range of motion were different from a standard pilot. Caden redesigned the entire interface. He moved the primary controls closer together. He reduced the resistance on the steering mechanism. He added a secondary stabilization system that would compensate automatically for any asymmetry and pilot input. He added voice command capability as a backup for any control she could not reach comfortably. He tested the interface himself. Then he adjusted it. Then he tested it again. By the end of week 7, the machine was almost complete. It sat in the center of his workshop under the full bank of lights, and it was the most beautiful thing Caden had ever built. The hull was smooth and silver with faint blue lines where the energy channels ran beneath the surface. The cockpit was open at the top, designed for visibility, with a curved windshield that would protect the pilot from wind and debris. The 2 engine pods sat on their mounts, connected by the control cable, humming very softly even when powered down. It looked like something that belonged in a museum, or in a race. Caden stood back and looked at it. He thought about Lyra. He needed to find her. Finding a Valhari grandmother and her granddaughter in the outer rim was not simple. The outer rim did not have a central registry. Ships came and went without filing complete records. People moved around for all kinds of reasons, most of them involving a desire not to be found. Caden had a name, Sarah, and a ship description, pale gray hull, mixed registration markings, engine with a 12% fuel compression variance that he had corrected, but that might have drifted back by now. He put out quiet inquiries through the trader network, not direct questions. Indirect ones. Mentions of a Valhari family he owed a debt to. Questions about whether anyone had seen a small gray transport in certain sectors. It took 9 days. A fuel station operator 3 systems over had seen them. They had docked for 2 nights about a month ago. The operator remembered the girl in the mobility frame. He remembered because she had asked him very detailed questions about his fuel processing equipment, and he had been impressed. Caden sent a message through the station's relay system. He kept it simple. He said he had finished the repair work on the frame, and there were some additional adjustments he wanted to make at no charge. He said if they were in the area, they should stop by. He did not mention the podracer. He waited. 12 days later, the pale gray transport with the mixed registration markings docked at Bay 7. Sarah came down the ramp first. She looked at Caden with careful eyes. She was not sure why she was here. The message had been vague. She was a cautious woman. She had learned to be. Then Lyra appeared at the top of the ramp. She looked at Caden. She smiled that same unguarded smile. Caden said he had something to show them. He led them to the main workshop. He had covered the podracer with a large canvas sheet. He was not sure why. It just felt right. It felt like the kind of moment that deserved a reveal. He stopped in front of the covered machine. He looked at Lyra. He said that she had told him flying looked like freedom. She nodded. She remembered. He said he agreed with her. He pulled the canvas away. The silence that followed lasted about 4 seconds. Then Lyra made a sound that Caden had no word for. It was not a gasp, and it was not a cry, and it was not a laugh. It was all 3 of those things at once, compressed into a single small sound that came from somewhere very deep. Her amber eyes were enormous. She stared at the machine. She stared at the cockpit. She stared at the control interface that Caden had built specifically for her hands. Sarah said nothing. She put her hand over her mouth. Caden explained what it was. He explained how it worked. He explained the modifications he had made to the control system. He explained the stabilization features. He explained that the power output was carefully calibrated for safety, and that he had tested every system multiple times. He explained all of this in a calm, technical voice. His hands were shaking slightly the entire time. Lyra asked if she could sit in it. Caden said yes. Getting her into the cockpit required some careful maneuvering with the mobility frame. Caden had anticipated this. He had built a small access ramp into the side of the cockpit structure. It took about 3 minutes. And then Lyra was sitting in the pilot seat. She put her hands on the controls. She looked straight ahead through the curved windshield. She did not say anything for a long moment. Then she said it felt like it was made for her. Caden said that was because it was. Sarah made a sound behind him. He did not turn around. He gave her a moment. He powered up the engine pods at minimum output. The hum filled the workshop. The blue energy lines along the hull brightened. The machine lifted very slightly off the ground, just a few centimeters, hovering on its resonance field. Lyra's hands tightened on the controls. Her face was the most alive thing Caden had ever seen. That was the moment the workshop door opened, and the galactic diplomat walked in. His name was Ambassador Velenthos. He was Dravathi. Caden had never seen a Dravathi in person before. Very few humans had. The Dravathi did not travel to the outer rim. They did not visit repair stations. They did not appear unannounced in the workshops of human mechanics. Velenthos was tall. Very tall. Nearly 2.5 meters. His body was slender in a way that suggested not fragility but precision, like something engineered, rather than grown. His skin was a deep blue-black, the color of deep space between stars. His eyes were gold. Not amber like Lyra's. Pure metallic gold. And they moved with a slow, deliberate quality that made Caden feel like every detail of the room was being catalogued and filed. He wore formal diplomatic robes, dark blue with silver geometric patterns along the edges. The patterns were similar to the engravings on the resonance core. He had 2 attendants behind him. They stayed near the door. He walked to the center of the workshop and stopped. He looked at the pod racer. He looked at Lyra sitting in the cockpit. He looked at Caden. The silence was the loudest thing Caden had ever experienced. Caden powered down the engine pods. The hum faded. The blue lines dimmed. The machine settled back to the floor. Lyra looked at the tall blue-black figure with curious eyes. She was not afraid. Caden noticed that again. She was never afraid of things she did not understand. She was interested in them. Velenthos spoke. His standard galactic was perfect. Every word placed with absolute precision. He said that he was aware of the construction activity at this station. He said that the Dravathi Engineering Council had been monitoring unauthorized resonance field signatures in this sector for several weeks. He said that the signature produced by this machine was detectable from a significant distance by the right equipment. He said that Caden had violated the Galactic Engineering Accord. Caden said he understood that. Thos said that the standard response to such a violation was immediate confiscation of the technology and formal proceedings against the individual responsible. Caden said he understood that too. Thos looked at the machine again. He walked around it slowly. He examined the hull. He looked at the engine mounts. He leaned down and looked at the control interface inside the cockpit, very close to where Lyra was sitting. Lyra looked back at him. She asked if he was the one who made the rules about who could build things like this. Thos looked at her for a moment. He said that his people had established those guidelines, yes. Lyra asked why. Thos said it was complicated. Lyra said she was good at complicated things. Something happened in Thos's gold eyes. Something very small. A shift, almost nothing. But Caden saw it. Thos straightened up. He continued his examination of the machine. He spent a long time looking at the modified resonance core. He did not touch it. He just looked. Then he said something that Caden had not expected. He said the core was wrong. Caden said he knew. He said it was not a copy of the Dravathi design. He said he had developed his own approach based on the underlying physics. Thos said that was not what he meant. He said the core was wrong in the sense that it was better. The field stability was higher than standard Dravathi racing cores. The energy efficiency was measurably improved. The resonance harmonics were cleaner. He said this in a flat, factual tone, like he was reading a technical report. Caden did not know what to say. Thos asked how long Caden had been working on this. Caden said about 2 months. Thos said that Dravathi engineers had been working on improving core field stability for 11 years, without achieving what Caden had achieved in 2 months. Another silence. Caden said he had approached the problem differently. He had not tried to improve the existing design. He had started from the physics and built toward the result, without the assumptions that came from the existing design tradition. Thos looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at Lyra again. He asked her name. She told him. He asked her what she wanted to do with this machine. She said she wanted to fly. He asked if she understood that the machine was built with technology that humans were not permitted to use. She said yes. She said Caden had told her. He asked if she thought that was right. The rule. She thought about it for a moment. Then she said she thought rules should have reasons, and if the reason for a rule stopped being true, the rule should change. Thos was quiet for a long time. Then he turned to Caden. He said that he was going to make a report to the engineering council. Caden said he understood. Thos said the report would be accurate and complete. Caden said he understood that too. Thos said that accurate and complete reports sometimes took time to process, especially when they contained technical findings that required careful review by senior council members. He said such reviews could take several weeks. He looked at Caden steadily. He said he hoped that during that review period nothing further would happen at this station that would complicate the situation. Then he looked at Lyra one more time. He said that the field stability readings on the core were genuinely remarkable. He turned and walked out of the workshop. His 2 attendants followed. The door closed behind them. Caden stood very still for about 10 seconds. Then he let out a breath that felt like it had been held for 2 months. Lyra asked what just happened. Caden said he was not entirely sure, but he was smiling. 3 days later, Caden took the pod racer outside. There was a flat stretch of terrain on a nearby moon, uninhabited. No monitoring stations. Hard-packed surface with good visibility in all directions. Caden had scouted it twice before. It was the kind of place where nothing happened and nobody came. He transported the machine there in his own small cargo hauler. Sarah came with Lyra. They did not talk much on the way. There was not much to say. Some moments do not need words around them. The moon's surface was pale and quiet. The sky above was deep purple, the kind of color you only get on moons that orbit gas giants. The giant itself was visible on the horizon, enormous and amber-colored, its rings catching the distant starlight. It was, Caden thought, a very good place for a first flight. He set the machine down on the flat surface. He ran through every system check twice. He checked the control interface. He checked the engine mounts. He checked the resonance core output levels. He checked the stabilization system. Everything was perfect. He helped Lyra into the cockpit. She was quiet while he did this, focused. She had been asking him questions about the controls for 3 days. She had memorized everything he told her. She had asked him to describe the feel of the controls, the response time, the way the machine would move when she pushed the steering left or right. She was ready. Caden stepped back. He looked at her sitting in the cockpit, small and still, and completely focused. Her hands on the controls. Her amber eyes looking straight ahead at the flat open surface in front of her. He said her name. She looked at him. He said to start slow. He said to get a feel for the response before she pushed the speed. He said the stabilization system would help her, but she should trust her own instincts too. He said if anything felt wrong, she should ease off the throttle, and the machine would settle. She nodded. She looked forward again. She powered up the engines. The hum rose. The blue lines brightened. The machine lifted off the surface, hovering at about half a meter. Dust swirled away from the engine pods in 2 perfect circles. Lyra held it there for a moment. Then she pushed the throttle forward. The machine moved, smooth and fast and absolutely certain of itself. It crossed the flat surface in a long straight line, accelerating steadily, the engine hum rising in pitch as the speed increased. Caden watched. Sierra stood beside him. She had her hand over her mouth again. At about 300 meters out, Lyra turned. A wide, sweeping arc. The machine leaned into it perfectly. The stabilization system and her own hands working together without any visible seam between them. She came back toward them faster than she had gone out. She was laughing. Caden could hear it even over the engine sound. Clear and bright and completely free. The laugh of someone who had just discovered something they had always known was possible, but had never been allowed to prove. She made 3 more passes, each one faster than the last, each one more confident. She tried a tighter turn on the 4th pass, and the machine responded exactly as it should. She tried a slight elevation change on the 5th, lifting the nose and climbing a few meters before leveling out. She was a natural. Caden had suspected she might be. The way she had asked questions, the way she had memorized the controls, the way she had looked at that vid feed 17 times. She had been studying. She had been preparing for something she did not know yet was coming. On the 6th pass, she brought the machine to a smooth stop about 10 meters in front of them. She sat in the cockpit for a moment without moving. Then she looked at Caden. Her face was something he would never be able to fully describe. Joy was part of it, but it was more than joy. It was the face of someone who had just proven something. Not to anyone else, to themselves. She said it was exactly like flying. Caden said he knew. She asked how he knew. He said because that was what he had built it to be. Sarah made a sound beside him. He still did not look at her. He kept his eyes on Lyra. Lyra asked if she could go again. Caden said yes. She went again. And again. And again. They stayed on that moon for 4 hours. By the end, Lyra was doing things with the machine that Caden had not specifically designed for, but that the machine handled perfectly, because he had built it with more capability than the minimum. He had built it with room to grow, room for her to grow. When they finally loaded the machine back into the cargo hauler, the purple sky had deepened, and the gas giant on the horizon had shifted to a deeper amber as the light changed. Lyra sat in the hauler on the way back and did not say much. She was tired in the good way, the way you get tired when you have used yourself fully and completely, and it was worth every bit of it. At one point she looked at Caden and said thank you. He said she was welcome. She said she meant it. He said he knew. She said she wanted to race someday. A real race. With other pilots. Caden looked at her. He thought about Velen Thos and his gold eyes, and his careful words about review periods and technical findings. He thought about what it might mean if a Dravathi ambassador filed a report that included the phrase, field stability, higher than standard Dravathi racing cores. He thought about rules, and the reasons behind them, and what happened when the reasons stopped being true. He said he thought that someday was probably closer than she thought. She smiled. That same smile. The one that did not ask for anything. The one that just existed. 2 weeks later, a formal communication arrived at the station from the Dravathi Engineering Council. It was addressed to Caden Rowe, human mechanic, Outer Rim Station, unnamed. It was not a confiscation order. It was not a formal violation notice. It was an invitation. The council requested his presence at the Dravathi Engineering Summit on Vareth Prime. They requested that he bring his technical documentation for the modified resonance core. They noted that his approach to field stability optimization represented a significant contribution to the field, and that the council wished to discuss potential collaborative research opportunities. At the bottom of the communication, in smaller text, there was a secondary note. It said that the council was also reviewing the current provisions of the Galactic Engineering Accord as they related to human participation in resonance technology development. It said the review was expected to conclude within the standard quarter cycle. It was signed by Ambassador Velen Thos. Caden read the communication 3 times. Then he walked to the workshop. He stood in the middle of the empty space where the pod racer usually sat. He looked at the workbench. He looked at the tools. He looked at the lights overhead that he had burned through so many nights. He thought about a girl who had looked at a pile of parts and seen a pod racer. He thought about a smile that did not ask for anything. He thought about the word flying, and what it meant to someone who had been told they would never do it. He sat down on the stool where Lyra had sat that first day and asked him questions. He thought for a long time. Then he got up and started writing his response to the council. He accepted the invitation. He also included a request. He asked that the council consider, as part of their review of the accord, the possibility of establishing a junior racing program for pilots with mobility differences. He included Lyra's flight data from the moon. 4 hours of performance records showing response times, control precision, and adaptability that were, by any objective measure, exceptional. He sent the communication. He went back to work, not on the pod racer, on something new. Something he had been thinking about since the day Lyra had asked if she could go again. A second machine. Smaller, faster, with even better stability, with a control interface refined by everything he had learned from watching her fly. He had a lot of work to do. He was smiling when he started. Here is the thing about Caden Rowe that the official story never quite captures. He did not build that pod racer because he wanted to break the rules. He did not build it to prove something to the Dravathi, or to the engineering council, or to anyone who had ever doubted him. He did not build it out of anger or ambition or any of the dramatic motivations that make for a good story. He built it because a small girl with amber eyes had said the word flying like it was the most important word in any language. And he had believed her. That is the part that matters. Not the technology. Not the violation of the accord. Not even the remarkable engineering achievement of a modified resonance core that outperformed 11 years of Dravathi research. All of that is real, and all of that matters in its own way. But the heart of it is simpler than any of that. Someone saw a child who wanted something that the world had decided she could not have. And instead of accepting that decision, he picked up his tools. The Galactic Engineering Accord was amended 14 months after Caden's invitation to Vareth Prime. The new provisions included a pathway for human engineers to participate in resonance technology research under a collaborative framework with Dravathi oversight. It was not everything. It was not equal access. But it was a door that had previously been sealed shut, and now it was open. Lyra entered her first sanctioned junior race 8 months after that. She finished third. The following season she finished first in 4 of the 7 races she entered. The season after that, she was the youngest pilot in the history of the junior circuit to achieve a perfect qualifying score. She was interviewed after that qualifying run. The interviewer asked her who had taught her to fly. She said a human mechanic on a station with no name had built her a machine, and told her that someday was closer than she thought. She said he had been right. Caden watched that interview from his workshop on Vareth Prime, where he had been working for the past year as part of the new collaborative research program. He had a proper lab now. Proper equipment. Colleagues who argued with him about engineering theory and then bought him a drink afterward. He still had grease under his fingernails. Some things do not change. The twist in this story, the thing that nobody in the official record ever quite said out loud, was this. Velan Thos had known about the construction at the station for longer than he admitted. The resonance field signature had been detectable for weeks before he appeared. He had waited. He had watched the data coming in from the monitoring equipment. He had seen the field stability numbers improving day by day. He had seen something being built that his own engineers had not been able to build. And he had made a choice. He had chosen to walk through that door instead of sending a confiscation team. He had chosen to look at a small girl in a cockpit and ask her what she thought about rules. He had chosen to write a report that took a very long time to process. Thos was asked about this later, in a different interview, by a journalist who had pieced together the timeline. The journalist asked why he had waited, why he had not acted immediately when the signature was first detected. Thos said that the Dravathi had a concept in their language that did not translate perfectly into standard galactic. The closest approximation was something like the moment when the wrong thing becomes the right thing. He said that every engineer in history who had ever built something that changed the world had done so by recognizing that moment and acting on it. He said he had recognized it. He said he had simply chosen not to stand in its way. If this opened your eyes to what one person with the right skills and the right reason can build, then you already understand what this story is really about. It is not about technology, it is not about rules. It is about what happens when someone decides that a child's dream is worth more than a regulation. It is about what humans are capable of when they stop asking for permission. So let us bring this home. Caden Rowe was not a hero in the traditional sense. He was not a soldier or a diplomat or a chosen one. He was a mechanic on a forgotten station who had been written off by the world he came from. He had every reason to keep his head down and fix cargo haulers for the rest of his life. Instead, he built something impossible. He built it with his hands and his mind, and a reason that was bigger than any rule. And in doing so, he changed not just one girl's life, but the entire framework of how two civilizations related to each other. The second thing to take away is this. The most powerful force in the universe is not technology or politics or military strength. It is the decision to see someone who has been overlooked and say, I am going to do something about that. Caden saw Lyra, really saw her, and everything that followed came from that single moment of genuine attention. And the third thing, rules exist for reasons. When the reasons change, the rules should change too. Lyra understood this at 9 years old. It took the rest of the galaxy a little longer, but they got there. If you made it to the end of this story, you are exactly the kind of person this channel exists for. You love stories that go deeper than the surface. Stories that ask real questions about power and possibility, and what it means to be human in a universe that is much larger than any of us. Hit that subscribe button right now, so you never miss a story like this one. And if this one moved you, hit the like button too. It genuinely helps more people find these stories, and these are stories worth finding. Drop a comment below and tell me this. If you were Caden, would you have built it? Knowing the risk, knowing the rules, knowing what could happen, would you have picked up those tools? I want to know what you think. And if you want to go deeper into stories like this one, the next video is already waiting for you. It is about another human who did something the galaxy said was impossible. And the ending is even more unexpected than this one. Click it now. You will not regret it.